I think this is safe to say going to be the most jam-packed episode that we have had yet of the Apple Circle podcast. There is so much to dive into. There is so much to talk about. And we have a lot of interesting takes on what happened yesterday at the event. As we record this, it is Wednesday. We've had 24 hours to digest, to let this info simmer. And I have a lot of thoughts. I can't even speak. I'm so excited. Matt, I know you have a lot of thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
We will get into all of it. But first, of course, we want to hear from you guys. Let us know your thoughts. If you have feedback on this, on the episode, on the event, let us know by either texting our Apple Circle hotline number, which is 949-354-3508, or you can message us on Twitter or the Apple Circle there. You can check out our YouTube channel, which is the Apple Circle Podcast, for a full video version of this conversation, which we're doing right now. And, okay, we got all the formalities out of the way. Matt, it's been 24 hours. How are you feeling about the event? I think we sort of rated it yesterday. Are you more excited than you were a day ago, or are you a little less excited now that you've had time to process?
I'd have to say overall, I'm less excited, but I'm more excited about certain things and less excited about other things. So yeah, I'm still pumped though. I still think out of 1 to 10 excitement scale, I think this was still an 8, and I'm still feeling good about everything. I'm still excited, but certain products, after thinking about them, which we're gonna get into, I'm less excited than I was initially. What about you?
The more I think about it, I'm very excited. I think that I wanted something that I got that I now don't want. Like I really wanted a Mac Mini Pro that now I don't think I'm actually gonna buy it, which we'll get into, but I think that it was a cool event. I also just can't help but think that, man, Apple must have been so excited because this almost didn't leak.
Oh, it was so close.
I should say that the rumors we had about this event drastically changed between 24 and 48 hours before that event. That's when things really changed over the weekend, which is what I'm starting to see a trend more and more with Apple events. It's like the day or two before is where like everything gets leaked for whatever reason. I don't know if just like loose lips sink ships and people are just willing to talk, or whatever the case may be. It's good for us. Everything sort of leaked, and this event took a whole 180 turn. It was going to be a kind of a boring M2, MacBook Pro, iPhone SE thing to, oh man, we're going to get an all new Mac and an all new display, which we did. And I'm excited. So where do we start? Do we get the sort of formalities out of the way? Do we talk about iPhone and iPad? And
Let's get the iPhone out of the way, because that is by far the most boring thing that they did. So iPhone SE3, basically the same thing we had last year, but it has an A15 inside. It has stronger glass, which they have not called Ceramic Shield, but they say they phrase it the same way as if it was Ceramic Shield, but they don't actually call it that, so that's interesting. And did I say 5G already?
I don't think so. But 5G support is there.
5G support, but it's only sub 6. It is not millimeter wave. A slightly better battery life. They say they don't actually quantify it very well. It's like a few hours more, like with video recording, or not video recording, but watching video. And then the camera, because of the A15, is now supporting things like Smart HDR4, True Depth? No, that's a different thing. That's the
Deep Fusion.
Deep Fusion, that's what I was thinking of. And then also better video recording as well, but the same hardware itself. So yeah, that is the iPhone SE3. Nothing really new there. The biggest thing about it is that it's $30 more. $30, not a huge, deal. It's not like if you can afford $400, can you not afford $430? But it's more just, of all products to raise the price, their lowest cost iPhone is kind of weird. Well, not even lowest cost, but just oldest. Like they've been making this basic design for years at this point. It can't cost them anything to make all these products. So the fact that they raise it on this one is kind of weird.
People are mad too. I've seen a lot of hot takes on Twitter. People say it's like a 5G tax. People are saying that it's due to inflation. I don't understand why. I mean, here's the good news, is that I'm sure carrier subsidies will wipe away whatever this difference is, if not the entire phone. I'm sure that if you're willing to sign on to a cell carrier for 2 or 3 years, they will pay for the phone in full for you or give you that credit. So I don't think that's a huge issue, but we rarely see Apple, we rarely see them raise the price on things, especially over year-to-year upgrades, which is why this is just so odd that they'd raise this $30.
Yeah, and if it's the 5G, the iPad Air, which we'll talk about, also got 5G, but they kept the price exactly the same. Plus, that got the M1 chip, which that seems like it would actually cost more to put in there. So it's not so much that they raise the prices, because if it is like an inflation thing, well, then that makes sense. But it's like only on this product that they raise the price. It's kind of weird.
So iPhone SE aside, which we kind of knew this was coming.
That's
It's
about
not
everything,
not a whole lot. Let's get into iPad Air. So one of the weird last minute rumors that was true on this was not the stuff we knew. We knew 5G was coming. We knew center stage. We heard a new chip, but for whatever reason, Apple did not do the A15 Bionic. They did the M1, which the more I think about it, the more it doesn't make sense. What I have heard, I don't know if this is a theory. I just the rumblings I've heard online are people are saying that they just have a lot of these M1s and they have some to spare. I've also heard a theory that Apple, this is weird, Apple is putting the M1 into as many devices as possible so they can show that they have this huge growing ecosystem of M1 devices, that they can kind of inflate that number just a bit to show, look at all the M1 Max we have, look at all the Apple Silicon devices we have. I don't know if I believe that or not, but
like, since it's like what, 2 years into the Apple Silicon transition, instead of saying we have these many Macs that we've sold, they could say we've had these many M1 devices that we've sold, which if you include iPads is like way more than just Macs.
I'm assuming so. I guess the theory didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I think.
Well, like for what? Like what does that get them?
What's
like,
so weird? Well, we can get into this. I guess we can get into it now or later. I'm sure we'll touch on it. I've heard now. There's like new reports that like the M2 is like delayed and like no one now knows when that's coming because there were some new info from Ming-Chi Kuo about the MacBook Air, and now he says that might not have the M2. So what's weird is that while all this stuff just broke yesterday, the fate of like what's coming next is very unclear. And now if we assume that the M2 is delayed until 2023, then what are they going to do? Is that why the M1 went in here and not the A15? I don't understand. I guess it boggles my mind why the iPad Air needs an M1. Is it just so they can say it has it, or is there a good reason why this didn't get the A15? I'm not complaining and saying this is a bad move. I just still, like we talked about before, the iPad and iPad OS is so limited by, the software. I don't understand what this additional hardware really lends itself to do.
Right, and you get the 8 gigabytes of RAM, and the only thing that you don't get that you would get in, say, the iPad Pro is Thunderbolt support. You only get faster, quote unquote, USB-C speeds. But everything else is basically the same. And I think that kind of, I agree, it's confusing. But that leads to the question from Rebecca, which says, love your podcast. 2 loves on that. That's great. Thank you very much. And on YouTube. We got a YouTube watcher. Man, this is great. And the Apple Store. Dang. Look, every part of this sentence just keeps getting better and better.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about, thank you very much. I'm thinking about getting an iPad Air or a Pro 11-inch. I would like to wait for the iPad Pro 11-inch to get that new display, which we'll talk about. I was wondering if you had any thoughts when it might be out. And that, again, was from Rebecca. But yeah, this is kind of the ultimate question. So iPad Pro, there's 2 models, right? You get the 11, the 12.9. If you're in the market for a 12.9 or you want that bigger display or you want the mini LED display, well, actually the mini LED display is probably coming to the 11, but just for the pure size of it, obviously the iPad Pro is the only way to go. But if you're looking for that 11-inch range, right now as it sits, the argument for the iPad Pro just does not make that much sense at all.
Well, I think what's so weird too is that not only does the iPad Pro look like less and less of a good value for the dollar, but also now to the sort of the second part of her question is when could this be coming? We don't know. If the M2 is delayed, then maybe we don't see new iPad Pros this year. That is a possibility that we could see, even though we've heard that Apple's planning this redesign and they're planning, mini LED for the 11-inch. I guess just taking that all off the table, if you need an iPad Pro sooner than later, it's sort of hard to say when to wait for because we don't know if they're ever going to come this year or not, which is sort of weird because that was not the case just a week ago.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess, so just to lay it out, what's the difference between the iPad Pro? Assuming we don't get an update for a little while, at least a few months at the very least, what are we looking at here? So iPad Pro is 11 inches.
Right.
You get Thunderbolt 4. You get 120 hertz display, nothing to scoff at. We know we love those displays. And then you get the camera system on the back with the 2 cameras, one ultra wide, one regular, or wide, I guess they call it, and the LiDAR scanner. And that is it, I believe.
I think speakers, like the iPad Pro has better speakers technically than the Air.
Okay,
some
yeah, sure. But
mention
they
of
both
that.
sound great. I've listened to both.
Yes.
And you're not missing out on anything. But I think that is it, pretty much. Now, here's the thing. The iPad, I'm looking at my screen here. The iPad Pro 11-inch, $799 starting, and that is for 128 gigabytes. So iPad Air does not offer 128 gigabytes, starts at 64 for $599. And if you want 256, you go to $749. So you're getting double the storage. Well, not double the storage. No, close to double the storage for almost the same price as the iPad Pro. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds, at least as it sits now. And yeah, unless you want that bigger version, I just don't see what the play here is.
Yeah.
I guess if you just, no, because it's still more expensive to get 128. So it's better, I think would be better to get the Air with more storage for a very similar price.
I mean, I love ProMotion and I love Face ID, but those are like the only two things
Face ID, I totally
drawing
forgot to mention
you.
Face ID.
Well, yeah. So I guess that's like, but that's really the big selling point now between iPad Pro and iPad Air is Face ID. What else? You just explained the differences. It's very, very minor, which I think for most people, save the money and go with the Air. Unless you really want the 120 hertz ProMotion display and you really want Face ID, then go with the iPad Pro. But I'm not sure for what, $200 if it's necessarily worth it for most people out there.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're an enthusiast in some way, shape, or form, and you actually care about some of these things. So when you get to that point, then yeah, you're probably going to want to opt for the Pro. Like me personally, I would still buy the Pro, even though it doesn't really make all that much sense, but that's just, I care about those little tiny details. But I'm talking about for the general audience, when they walk into an Apple store or they open up the online store and they compare these two products to each other, it's just confusing. It just doesn't, there's no real clear reason, especially if you don't already know why you would want it, because Touch ID and Face ID, well, both are biometrics. That's fine. And then 120 hertz, well, if you're just kind of abstractly reading about that, like on a website, that doesn't give you anything. Like, I don't know what that, I don't know. I'm just confused here. I think what they really need to do, which again, we talk about this every time the iPad comes up, is they need to differentiate and do more with what the iPad Pro is. Not necessarily in hardware. I think the hardware is still great. Like, I actually don't think they need to change anything with the hardware, but software. But give them more pro apps, do maybe a little bit more with iPad OS in terms of like file storage, that kind of stuff. Make it more, not a pure Mac. Don't put Mac OS on there, even though some people would love that. But I like iPad OS. Just give it all the features that we want and all the, like, let developers port the the Mac apps over to it since it's running the M1 chip. And initially, I thought, okay, this is a direction that would make sense because it has the M1 chip inside. So now they can really boost up what the iPad Pro can do. But now that the iPad Air has it, now I'm confused. Now I just don't get it.
I guess if you want to wait for a new iPad Pro, the soonest we could see it would be the next event around May or June. So if you have some time to wait, you can wait. There's also a chance we see it in the fall at some kind of fall event, but things are very... iPad Pro news has been very sort of sparse as is this year, and now things are even more confusing. So I would say that unless you really want the higher end display, and you want Face ID and ProMotion, I'd probably save the money and go with the Air because you're getting basically all the Pro features, minus a couple in a more affordable form factor.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess, like you said earlier, like maybe they don't update it. I have a hard time believing that, but it could also be possible they just delay it a few more months. And the reason I'm thinking about it is because remember in 2020 during lockdown, during the pandemic, they released the 2020 iPad Pro, which had the only update was the camera system on the back. And that was just such a weird update. Do you remember that?
Right, the A12. That's the one I actually.
Yeah.
That's the time I got on the iPad Pro. The most boring update.
A12Z, coming from
right?
what you had, which was nothing. That's a good update.
Yeah.
But
the iPad Pro really hasn't changed all that much since 2018.
Yep.
And like you said, I think the hardware is still really good. And I guess there's a case to be made that maybe they don't need to push something this year. Maybe they sort of wait, especially if the sort of rumblings about M2 being delayed are true until next year. Then I guess it makes sense to wait. And I guess obviously the big thing is the mini LED on the 11-inch. That's really great,
Right.
but I don't know if there's a huge pent-up demand for an iPad Pro update now. I think most people would be fine just waiting for something next year. And I think we have seen a couple of products, I don't know if iPad Pro is in there, that they've sort of done an every other year update. I don't think they have to do an update every year. Just something to sort of consider right now because things are so unknown.
And to finalize this question, this is actually what I would say. If they do end up updating the 11-inch and it has a mini LED display, and you're kind of debating between the two, I would actually opt for the iPad Pro at that point. Because I think the mini LED display, I don't know why that just can't roll off my tongue very well. The mini LED display, I think, is actually worth it. It's a really noticeable difference, in my opinion, and it elevates what the iPad is really good at, which is consuming content. If you're watching HDR videos, which Netflix supports, YouTube supports, all of like Apple's shows are supported in that, so on and so forth. All that is awesome. Plus, you get the 120 hertz. So if you want this for art, then you have that ability too. So you get the really low refresh rate for the Apple Pencil. Like, if the 11-inch had the mini LED display, I'd say it would be worth it to pay the more money, slightly more money to get that over the Air. But as it sits now, save your money, get the Air.
So moving on to probably the star of the show, that was the Mac Studio and the Studio Display, which I'm sure we will talk a lot about because there's a lot to say here.
Oh, yeah.
But Matt, first I want to ask you this because I've seen some debate on this and I don't understand. Is this I've seen a couple of things. Some people are saying, is it a Mac Mini Pro or a Pro Mac Mini? And is it a Mac Pro replacement? So to ask you, is this a replacement or an addition to the Mac Mini lineup, in addition to the lineup, or is this supposed to replace the Mac Pro moving forward?
Oh, this doesn't replace the Mac Pro because they specifically said on stage that the next computer they're going to be talking about and showing off is the Mac Pro. And we've already seen rumors so we got the M1 Ultra chip, which is two M1 Max stacked together. But when we got rumors of that earlier, along with that, we also got rumors of 4 of those chips stacked together. So that's presumably what we're going to see in the Mac Pro. So yeah, it's not replacing the Mac Pro. Have heard some people say that, which I really don't know where that came from, especially since Apple literally in the video said that they're going to talk about the Mac Pro, which they never do, by the way. They never mention upcoming products. So that's kind of interesting. What is interesting, though, is what it might be replacing, because like you said, we were kind of expecting a Mac Mini Pro, we were expecting a Mac Mini to begin with, but you didn't see any of that, which is kind of interesting. And then also a Mac Mini Pro on top of that. I mentioned a few weeks ago and a few times that just didn't make that much sense to me, that they would have the cheapest computer but also have the most expensive chip in it. It just didn't match perfectly, and I think I was right. Honestly, I'm going to just call it there that I was right, and that this Studio is what everyone was thinking of and what the rumors were pointing to with this Mac Mini Pro, concept thing. So the Mac Studio, I think, is that. But I don't think it replaces the Mac Mini. I still think we will see that, only because the rumors of what we were thinking the Mac Mini would be were so different than what this Mac Studio is. It was supposed to be smaller, with colors, with some ports in the back, with like a plexiglass top almost that let the color shine through. So that sounded very much like a different computer. So I think that's still coming, but kind of back to what you're saying about the M2, if that's delayed, maybe that's why we didn't see it. What it is replacing, though, is kind of interesting because at the same time of this event, they discontinued the 27-inch iMac. And a while ago, they discontinued the iMac Pro. And we were kind of hoping that we would also see an update to the iMac, either a 27-inch model or a iMac Pro model. We didn't get that. And now a 27-inch iMac just doesn't exist. So the question I have is not, is it replacing the Mac Pro? That doesn't make any sense. And not is it replacing the Mac Mini, because that's like a different category. But is it replacing the iMac 27-inch?
Well, yes, I think that there will no longer be a 27-inch consumer-focused iMac. I think the only consumer-focused iMac we're going to get is a 24-inch model. That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
What I do think, though, and there's two different opinions here and two different ways Apple could go, is with the fate of the iMac Pro. On one hand, I do see a world where this fills the void left by the iMac Pro. That if you wanted something more, desktop focused, more pro than an iMac, and you are okay with a, something on your desk, this sort of checks all the boxes. It doesn't have a built-in display, but a lot of people that's secondary. They really want the power in a desktop form factor, but they don't want to go all the way up to the Mac Pro. That's sort of why the iMac Pro was so great, was because give or take the screen, which is great, you got that power in a desktop form factor that wasn't the Mac Pro. So maybe there's a world we live in that the iMac Pro does not exist any longer. But my counter to that is that we've heard from so many sources, credible sources, these pretty detailed rumors about an iMac Pro with a 27-inch ProMotion mini LED display with a more maxed version of the M1 Max chip, that I don't think this product is over. There's been too much about it. It doesn't match the studio display because that's not mini LED, that's not ProMotion. There's just been too many rumors about this, too many specific things that I think that an iMac Pro is still coming. When it comes, I don't know, but I'm hedging my bet against the removal of the iMac Pro. I think there will be an iMac Pro. I just don't know when.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I'm in the middle. I'm not sure that it's dead, but I'm also not sure when or if we will see it. And I mean, I guess one argument you could say is like maybe this is just a different kind of version of a display, because we did get the studio display, which one thing about it is that it has an A13 processor inside. So I guess there could be a world where that rumor of the iMac Pro is actually like a second version of an XDR where it does have an M1 chip inside powering the display, but it's not actually a computer. I mean, is that possible?
Well, I guess the question too is, I guess if you want an iMac Pro, would you be happy with a Mac Studio? Because it basically gives you all that power. And then let's say you bought a studio display, or we live in a world where this isn't that crazy either, that maybe in a year from now, they release a Studio Display Pro that is mini LED ProMotion. Then that you can sort of build your own iMac Pro in that sense, and probably would be, better than the iMac Pro Apple would give you. It's so confusing because they could go so many different ways with this, but there were so many rumors on this that I don't think it was for nothing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm looking up right now the price of the iMac Pro base, because I was just thinking, like, right now the M1, or sorry, not the M1, but the Mac Studio starts at, remember the price, $299, I believe.
Mac Studio is $19.99.
Yeah, $19.99. Great price, by the way, I think.
Right.
And then I'm bringing up the Studio display is $15.99, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what is that together as I look this up?
So what is that, $35.99?
$35.99. Yes. I mean, that's, if I, off the top of my head, I believe that's very close to the price of the iMac Pro. So it's like, you're kind of getting the same thing, right? It's just two different devices. And what's the point of combining them at this point? If the display is the display and then you can get this computer, like, what's the point of getting a separate device that is just both combined? Because you're not really taking it with you. Some people do that, but that's not really a thing. And it would be actually easier to take the Mac Studio with you. Also, kind of what they said during the announcement was how people wanted more modularity and more configurability. And this is what the Mac Studio gives you, because with the iMac Pro, in 3 years, I have to get an entirely new computer. With this setup, let's say I get a Studio display and the Mac Studio, I just replace the Mac Studio, the display stays, or vice versa, depending on what update I need first. So you're actually probably saving money in the long run. And yeah, but I'm still with you. I still feel like we're going to see a 27-inch iMac of some sort, whether that is an iMac Pro or even just something updated. But
by the way,
well, here's the question: like, do you want to see that though? Is that something you want?
iMac Pro, $5,000 starting price tag. So actually now, a Mac Studio display don't look too bad, but you are getting a better display on the iMac. Well, on a modern iMac these days. Hold on. No, you're not. It's the same.
It's the same.
Never
it's
mind.
The same.
I take back what I said.
It's 600 nits. That's the only difference, which I think is only 100 nits more. I think the iMac is 5,000 nits, or not 5,000. Geez, that'd be great. 500 nits compared to the 600 of the Studio display. I think that's the only difference. So
your question of what I like to see. See, now the more I think about it, now I'm kind of talking myself out of it, because now maybe you don't need it. I don't. It's going to be a little confusing on how Apple is going to rebuild and reshape their Mac lineup, because now it's Mac Mini, Mac Studio, which I like Mac Studio, but it's a really weird name. It doesn't fit anywhere in the lineup of other products. So Mac Mini, Mac Mini Studio, MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, iMac, Mac Pro, there's a case to be made that an iMac Pro would be nice, but for me, as someone who loves a desktop experience, the only reason you'd want to get an iMac Pro, if the rumors are true, is A, it's all in one, and B, is that it would have a 27-inch ProMotion mini LED display. It really, for all intents and purposes, would come down to the display just being a little bit better. So I don't know, is it worth it for that? I don't know. Or can Apple just make a more pro version of the Studio Display, call it the Studio Display Pro, make it $299, and that's 27-inch mini LED ProMotion? I don't know.
Yeah, no, that actually makes sense. Is that would be the selling point of the iMac Pro, is that it's got basically the XDR built in, and then the computer is kind of the same as the Studio. So that I totally see that, but I'm on the same boat where I'd rather them do a, this rumored mid-tier like mini LED display that was kind of rumored. I think that's separate than the Studio Display, because the Studio Display is basically like what we've had forever, and then the XDR is at the top, and then I think we still can have room for something in the middle that's really high quality, but is a little less consumer. So yeah, I mean, unless it has that kind of a display, I don't see a reason for the iMac Pro to exist. But one thing I wanted to ask though is, leading up to this, we were both very excited about this Mac Studio, now that we know that this is Mac Studio, and possibly even getting one. But seems like you've had a change of heart on that. What's going on
there? The more I think about it, the more I think I don't think I actually need it. I mean, okay, if I was to start from the beginning with nothing, I would buy this because I'm at my desk. I don't need to be portable. I want this power in a desktop form factor, little device, and this would be perfect. I love the 10 gig Ethernet, lots of great Thunderbolt ports, all that stuff is great. And yes, I could go M1 Ultra, but even I'll admit M1 Ultra is probably overkill for the work we're doing. I mean, it'd be faster work, but I don't know. I guess it's yet to be seen from benchmarks and when people actually do their reviews how good the M1 Ultra is actually going to be, because the M1 Max has been fantastic. Yep. So assuming I got an M1 Max Studio, I don't know what that would give me that my MacBook Pro doesn't give me now, because we both have those CalDigit docks, which gives you all the ports you'd want, basically. USB-C, USB-A, SD card, all that stuff. So with those two devices together, I kind of have a great desktop solution as it is, and I don't know if especially if I got the M1 Mac Studio, what would I get from that I don't already have right now? It'd be all built into one box, I guess, but I'm not getting anything else. What I really want now is I kind of, my whole reason for this was I'd love a desktop Mac so then I could use my laptop as a laptop. And that was sort of my thinking. But since I already have a powerful laptop, I think my goal is just to keep this docked and then buy like a cheap MacBook Air or like a base MacBook Air whenever those comes out, or those come out rather, just to have something I can take around with me and sort of, have a nice laptop experience, but also save some money because hopefully that's going to be, significantly cheaper than a Mac Studio, because I already have the power I need. I basically have a Mac Studio right here on my desk, and it's a MacBook Pro, just closed in clamshell mode connected to a dock. So I think ultimately my ultimate goal is I want to have a desktop and a laptop, and I think my laptop can become my desktop ultimately, and it'll be my desktop for now. And then once the MacBook Air comes out, I'll just buy like a cheap base level MacBook Air just so I can have a laptop. That's my thinking as of now. What about you, Matt? Did you have a change of heart on Mac Studio?
Not so much. I mean, I did order the base model just to try it out because I'm in the same boat where I wanted to use my laptop as a laptop. But I'm also, the reason I want to use my laptop as a laptop isn't because of like let's see how to say this. Like a MacBook Air wouldn't really fulfill what I'm trying to do with it. Like I need, not maybe need is a strong word, but I want the power of this MacBook Pro that I have now on the go so I could do work and stuff on the go. If I just wanted to, browse the web and stuff with a, quote unquote laptop experience, well, I've got the iPad Pro for that, and that satisfies that for me. So I don't really need like a MacBook Air level or powered device. So yeah, I want to try having a desktop setup that I can also use a laptop for like going out places and, wanting to work while I'm there. So I'm going to try it out. Whether I'm going to keep this, that is a very different question. I'm just, as of now, I think no, but I'm excited about this computer, and it will be probably one that is in my life coming in the near future. I just don't know if it's going to be this particular moment in time because I'm kind of in the same boat as you, where it's like it works perfectly fine with what I have now. The MacBook Pro is great. Like I'm not itching for anything new, and I don't really want to spend the money on the Ultra. So it's like if I'm not doing that, then what's the point?
That's the thing too. Is it worth $3,000 or $2,000 base to unplug a couple of cables? Because that's really what it comes down to now. Is I'm lazy and I don't want to unplug the cables and undock this thing. But that's really what it is, because Mac Studio is great, but if you go on M1 Max and you have a MacBook Pro now, you're gonna get, assuming it's gonna be the exact same experience. You're not gonna look at the computer, so you're looking at the screen. You're not gonna notice a difference. So I am curious to hear what your thoughts are on it. I'm really curious to see what the M1 Ultra can do. I don't know if it's $4,000 is $4,000.
I know.
And the M1 Max is so good that what do I get? Do I get even faster export times, even though I feel like the export times on this thing are faster? I mean, we talked before, the jump from Intel to an M1 Max is insane. It cannot be understated enough how
crazy,
more productive I am because I have this computer that can do a lot more things. But I don't know if that same productivity can, grow at the same rate by going to M1 Max to M1 Ultra. I just don't think so, at least not for the workflow I have right now. I'd love to try it, but I don't think so. I love the Mac Studio, but I think that I'm more of a I'm just going to sit back and see what happens, and I'm not really in a rush to buy one.
Yeah, the only reason I bought one was for testing purposes, but I'm kind of in the same feeling here where I'm not like, oh my God, I have to have this. Like I was with the MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro was like, we got to get this. Like that was a very big deal. And now I'm like, okay, that's cool. And I want one, but I don't feel like the itch to get it. I ordered the base model Mac Studio. And then I was like, but if I'm testing it, I should probably get the Ultra. Just, see how that goes. So I went to order the Ultra, canceled my other one, and then as soon as I went to order it, it slipped to like April time. I was like, oh no, now I got nothing. So then I went back, and luckily the base model was still available, so I went back and ordered that again. But yeah, no, I want to see what that Ultra does, because I mean, here's the biggest like difference from Intel to M1 Pro / M1 Max. M1 Max is what we're using. The M1. So on Intel for these podcasts, so we have the video that we're recording, which is, usually around an hour, which is we record in 1080p at 60 frames per second. So I put that into Final Cut Pro on an Intel machine to render that out so I can then, we can edit it. That took, I'd say, an hour minimum, and probably more like hour and a half. It was not, I would say it's not 1-to-1. Yeah.
It was 1080p 60 video. Right. It wasn't even 4K video.
Yeah. Exactly. Now with the M1 Max, I mean, correct me if maybe I'm exaggerating a tiny bit, but 10, 15 minutes?
If that.
It is significantly faster. But the bigger thing there is on the Intel side, when you were rendering this video, you basically can't use your computer. Like it's chugging along, and if you want to do other stuff, like you really can't. Now the M1 Max just kind of does it in the background. I'm still using my computer. I don't hear the fans really. And then I just keep working like normal. So it's that kind of thing. Are we going to see that kind of jump to the Ultra? Probably not. But I'm still interested to see how much faster something like that is, because that's noticeable. That gave me back an hour of time every single week. That's something that is well worth the money, I think.
And when you add, exports and stuff we do every day, it was a lot. Like the time could not be understated. And I'm so curious, whoever we see tests on, whoever gets the Ultra, to see what it's going to do. I just want to see how much better is it? Is it worth $2,000 more? I don't know, but I cannot wait to see what that chip can do. So we talked about ports, lots of ports, 10 gig Ethernet. The form factor basically looks like, 3 or 4 Mac Mini stacked on top of each other. Not a whole lot to say. I mean, I like it. I think that it's a great desktop solution. If I didn't have a MacBook Pro, I would buy this in a heartbeat because I don't need a laptop. And it's cheaper because you're not paying for that display you're never going to use. But it's just, if you have a MacBook Pro, I don't think you need to scratch the itch and go out and buy this, especially if you're just going to buy an M1 Max. You're just swapping an apples for apples. You're really not going to get anything out of it. I mean, I guess you could flip your MacBook Pro, put some money in your pocket, and then get a studio and probably get, maybe make a couple $100, but
don't trade it in though. Didn't you apply for the trade in? What was it?
Oh, it was $848 or something. It was ridiculous. I
That's
just
horrible.
for the sake of curiosity, I went on and went to the Apple website and did the trade in. It was nothing, and even someone on Marquez MKBHD, his team did what the trade-in value would be on a $20,000 Mac Pro, and I forgot what it was. I think it was Was it $500? Was it $1,000? It was
I think it was
nothing.
500. It was like
It was
nothing.
nothing.
No, it
For a
wasn't 500. I forgot what it was, but it was nothing.
I'll look
Yeah.
it up in a second, but for $20,000, you'd assume that it holds its value relatively well. Not at all.
Well, no, it does hold its value. It's just not the trade-in. Because
Not
if you
for
go on
Apple.
like Swappa or something, it sells for a reasonably good price. But
What's weird though is that we did trade-ins for our company here at JFL. We traded in older MacBook Pros for these M1 or M1 Maxes, and I feel like the trade-in value was actually pretty good.
it was like 1,800, 1,500, something like that.
It was that was for an older Intel MacBook Pro to a MacBook Pro. This is a brand spanking new M1 Max. $800 is like nothing. So there's no way a fair comparison here. And I wonder if there was a bigger push for trade-ins with MacBook Pros. Maybe Apple was trying to. I don't know what the deal is. For whatever the reason is, trade-in values are awful on Apple's website right now. So do not go through Apple for a trade-in because you're better suited to look elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I just thought that was so funny what was how much did our computer cost? Like an embarrassing amount, like 4,000 almost, right? Like 3,500.
I think it was at
And they're gonna
34, 35.
And they'll give you $800 for this laptop. I wish they would like do that, and then I'll buy it from Apple at that price. How about that? Let's make that deal. That'd be great. Okay, we kind of mentioned the Studio Display a little bit, but let's get into the details here. So the Studio Display released alongside the Mac Studio. And something that you mentioned yesterday that I don't know how I didn't know this, but Studio Display is actually a reusing of a name. So that was originally announced. Wow, that goes way back. Back in 2000, the Studio Display 15-inch was released. Oh, no, never mind. 2000 is when it was discontinued, the original one. 1998 was the first Apple Studio Display, which is cool. I don't know why I didn't know that, but they quickly switched over to Cinema Display after that. And that's really when I started getting into Apple stuff. But it's back. So, like you said, 27-inch, just regular LCD panel, 600 nits brightness, has that A13 chip built in. So it has a camera, ultra-wide, 12-megapixel front-facing camera for FaceTime and video calls, and it also has center stage built in. Plus, it has a built-in speaker system, which I'm sure is going to sound great. They say is the best sounding. Of course, they're going to say that. And then all the usual stuff, like it's got one Thunderbolt in the back and then 3 USB-Cs. And what else am I missing? That's kind of it. It comes with different stands. So it's got the basic stand, which is kind of what the iMac has. Then it has the I forgot what they call it, but it's the stand that is height adjustable. That's kind of like the Pro stand from the Pro Display XDR. And then they have a base mount option, but you cannot use or replace those. You have to buy the one you want. So that was kind of disappointing. I wish they put that mechanism, whatever they have on the Pro Display XDR. I think they should have just gone with that. That would have been great to see.
So, Matt, during this part of the presentation, I was curious just to know your thoughts because you were the one that you want an Apple display, but you don't want to go all the way up to the Pro Display XDR, or you do want to, but you'll do it reluctantly.
Yeah.
But you were waiting to see what else would happen. So here you go, 27-inch, 5K, Apple Studio Display. Looks great. Are you buying it, or are you keeping it? Is a better question.
I don't know. So I was, like you said, I was really excited for what this monitor might bring. But the more I think about it, the more disappointed is not the right word. Like, this is a good product. I'm glad Apple's back into, I guess underwhelmed is that's a good way to put it. Because I have a 27-inch BenQ monitor, which is right here. That's what I look at while we record these videos. It's a 27-inch. It's 4K, not 5K, granted, but I've used both, like 5K displays and a 4K display. The difference is not that noticeable, in my opinion. This is also P3 color gamut, so it's very accurate. It is, I think, 400 or 500 nits, so it's not as bright, but it's not, once you're in those ranges, it's not that big of a difference. And it's Thunderbolt, so one cable, I can do everything I need. It has speakers built in too, but they really suck. No camera, though. So it's like, what am I really upgrading to here? I have this monitor that already looks great. It's already very accurate, and I'm used to it. It does everything I need it to do. Why get this display? I think this is more for those people that don't have a display already, because at least in our field and what we do, if you already have an external display, it's probably not from Apple because they haven't made one in such a long time, unless you get the Pro Display XDR. So the display you have now is probably good enough. It's like, unless you're jumping in new, I just don't see the benefit. And basically, after thinking about it overnight and 24 hours later, I'm back on the XDR train. I want to see what they do with the second one. Mainly, I want to see what they do with the second one. Hopefully, they release the second one so that people will get those and then sell their old ones, and maybe I'll buy one of those. That's kind of the plan now. But it's a cool display. I'm glad they're making it, but I just don't really care about it anymore. But I also haven't seen it yet, so once it gets into the studio and I try it out, who knows? I might change my mind.
I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a great display. It's going to look great, great colors, integration, stuff like that. But I'm underwhelmed as well. And I kind of did the AR like virtual thing to like put it side by side with the monitor I have. And I have a 32-inch BenQ similar to yours. And I actually really like this monitor. It's 4K, plenty bright, good color accuracy. There's not a whole lot that I would want in a new monitor besides a bigger size, or at least the same size, and then high quality or higher quality. So for me, a 27-inch display would be a sort of a downgrade, at least in terms of size. Maybe if there was a variant that was mini LED in promotion, that would make a little bit more sense. But I just don't. I think going to the studio display would be a downgrade. I'd only want to make a lateral move or go up with Pro Display XDR, which is significantly more money. But that would be
way more money.
Is it 30-inch, 32-inch?
32-inch 6K.
Then that'd be half an inch bigger than this one and much better resolution. So that's what I want to have on my desk right here, not the studio display. I'm glad they're making it, like you said, but it's going to be interesting to see, because I feel like a lot of professionals probably won't buy this because, well, I guess it depends on the prosumer, YouTubers, content creators. Yes, especially if you do not have a monitor, then this is a great way to go. But I feel like a lot of people probably aren't going to be upgrading because there are plenty of other monitors out there that are the same size and mostly the same specs. You're not really getting anything here besides a really nice build quality and a nice webcam built in and that integration, but that's about it.
Yep, exactly. And I can't reiterate it enough. I'm glad Apple's making this, and it gets me excited that they're in the monitor space again, and I'm excited to see what they do with it. I'm just kind of meh about it. But once we get it in studio, I will give you my opinions, because I'm sure once I see it. And one thing about this BenQ I don't love, the design is good actually. There's no like logo on the front. It's very thin bezels. Like, it's actually pretty nice. But the Apple displays just look better. The design is better, and it's something you can almost like show off, kind of like an iMac. Like, an iMac is its own centerpiece. This display kind of seems like that thing again, where you don't really have to hide the monitor. It just looks good on its own. So that part I like, and me being who I am, that oftentimes is worth the money for me. But I'd still rather, obviously the XDR is way more expensive, but I'd still rather save up for that, since I already have something equally as good in many ways. But yeah.
Just think about what you could get for the price of a Pro Display XDR, full price. I mean, so let's say with the stand, $6,000, you could do an M1 Ultra Studio and a monitor, and still have money to spare. Yeah, you still have $500 to spare.
Yeah.
So it's there's a lot of mixing and matching you do. Obviously, not the same thing. If they could just bring, there's got to be, well, we'd heard rumors that Apple was working on multiple displays, so there's got to be something in the middle for like $3,000 that is a 30-inch mini LED ProMotion. I don't know, because
this is what I think.
You don't want to take away from Pro Display XDR.
Exactly. I think they're going to update the Pro Display XDR. So version 2 of the Pro Display XDR is going to be mini LED with the more dimming zones, similar to what the MacBook Pro and the iPad Pro have. And it's going to be ProMotion, and it's still going to be 32 inches and 6K. Oh, they could maybe go 8K, maybe if they really want to differentiate it.
We heard rumors Apple was working on a 7K monitor. Not sure if that's what this is.
7K?
But
I can see that. So let's say that's the second generation Pro Display XDR. And now that the Pro Display we currently have has been out for a little while, they can shift some of those components down to a more mid-range $3,000 display. $3,000 is probably a good range for it, which we have also heard rumors of. This would be mini LED, but it wouldn't have quite as many dimming zones, and it wouldn't be ProMotion, and it would miss out on some of those things. It would still only, God forbid, be 6K. So I could see that definitely happening, and that would probably be the sweet spot for me. I could completely justify in my head and in my wallet spending $3,000 for the current Pro Display XDR in a different form factor. That is the way to go, I think. But who knows if they're actually going to do that. I hope they do.
It is worth mentioning, too, that back in the cinema display days, they did have 3 sizes.
Yep, that's true.
Looking here, it was 20,
23, and
23,
30.
27, 30.
No, 20, 23,
Yes,
30.
20, 23, 30. And then with the Thunderbolt displays, the LED cinema displays, those were 24 and 27.
Yep, 24,
Yes.
27.
So-
They only had 2 options then.
So a try setup here, a triple offering would make sense, and that would be super cool. I mean, one thing is for sure is that Apple this year, and I guess these days, modern Apple is much more accommodating to different form factors, different prices, and different categories than Apple was before. Because Apple used to be, we're making like 6 products, choose one of these, this is it. You got to have kind of fit around the constraints of that product. Now Apple is like, oh, here's an iPad mini, iPad Air, iPad Pro, here's a studio display, here's a studio, here's a Pro display, Mac Pro. There's a lot of options, so I wouldn't put it past them to give us another option for a display, and I think that would be super cool. But I'm with you there. I'm curious to see what this thing looks like, but every time I see the Pro Display XDR, I'm like, this looks amazing, but you're $6,000 into it if you buy it new with the stand and everything. And then that doesn't count nanotexture if you go that route, or it's hard.
I mean, I'm fine. I want the stand, so I would get the stand with no nanotexture. That's what I want. That's $5,000. It's painful, man. That's a lot of money. Well, I mean, and it's like I just got the Canon C70, and I didn't pay that much for that camera, and that's a professional camera, like cinema camera. It's like, do I really need that display? It's like, no, I don't, which is why I don't have one yet. But I'm waiting for Apple to convince me why I need it, and I'm just hoping that this is the year it happens.
That's the tough thing too. It's like I don't have a problem spending money on AirPods, watch, iPhone, and even computer, because you need a good computer and all those things. But the display is like one of those like, oh well, kind of falls in line, but what I've got is good enough. Like when this thing goes out, I'll get rid of it and do something else.
Exactly.
But it's good enough. And then that's why I keep thinking about this iMac behind me in the video version. I had the opportunity to trade it into Apple for $500, and I should have done it. And then it now is vintage and it's not worth anything. And I want to get it off of my desk and do something else. And I don't know what to do. And decisions. I don't know. But Studio Display is super cool. Mac Studio is super cool. Nice mid-tier offering. Any final thoughts on these products? Matt, anything else you were thinking about?
Trying to think. Well, by next week, they come out the 18th, right?
Yes.
So we will not have our first hands-on with those next week, but pretty soon we should, hopefully. So yeah, I'm excited to get these in my hand. I'm glad that they exist. Well, actually, you know what we should talk about? Let's talk real quick. What happened with these rumors? So we mentioned that the rumors obviously last minute kind of swapped on us, but I think most of us were still expecting we would see Mac Mini and a base MacBook Pro, but that just didn't happen. So what is it? Just the M2? Is that really what it is?
This is fascinating because, well, first off, there's a lot of people that, like, I guess from the beginning, they claim that, oh, M2 didn't make any sense, but M2 made a lot of sense. I don't understand why people are so freaked out about Apple introducing an M2 this year, which I don't understand why. The M1 came in 2020, so why not an M2 this year? It doesn't make sense.
It's like 18 months, right? That's
but we heard from I consider one of the best, Mark Gurman, MacBook Pro, 13-inch, M2. It was over and over and again. It was going to come. I don't know what happened. That was very weird. I don't know if there was a issue with getting enough M2 chips. What it sounded like, though, was that they were going to sort of do a slow rollout of M2, so it would just be Mac Mini, and then it would just be MacBook Pro, so they weren't like the super high demand chips, and then they'd put it in the iPad Pro and stuff like that. I don't really understand what happened there, but that was one of the biggest curveballs thrown last minute that I've seen, because that seemed like for months it was a done deal, then just didn't happen. And then, iPhone SE, those rumors were spot on. The iPad Air stuff, that really came last minute. That was a weird processor change, but not a huge deal. And then the Mac Studio stuff, I don't know. I'd love to know the inside story with Luke Miani and what happened there, but it seems like, and this is not a one-time occurrence, it seems like more and more often, like I mentioned earlier, as we get like a day before the event or 2 days, there's like a massive amount of leaks. Because this happens every year with the iPhone. It's like a day before or even the morning of, we get like a bunch of leaks. And that happened this year. We saw a bunch of leaks the morning of specifications. So I don't know what happens right before. But yeah, this could have been a huge announcement if it had not been leaked. Because I don't think anybody we had heard rumblings of this, but we thought Mac Mini. We did not think Mac Studio. The display, I will say we called it here
Yep.
that we could see a display, because that was not rumored at all until the very last minute. Mark Gurman's like, oh, by the way, I heard these work on these was wrapped up months ago, so they might come as soon as, the 8th. Very, very weird. I don't understand. Leaks are a finite, fickle machine. They are not to be messed with. They don't make any sense. Another reason why you can't always trust them, and here is proof that things can change just like that at the last minute. Though I will say, I can't remember the last time Apple introduced something that wasn't leaked, because so far everything at this event was leaked, besides like the final names. So just throwing that out there. That say what you want about leaks, but they are becoming more and more accurate.
Yeah, no, yeah, everything was leaked, but it's just the way it was leaked was just so interesting. And even though everything is leaked, at the very least, it's more interesting now because, I mean, the last few events, things have been majorly wrong with what has been announced. The Apple Watch Series 7, completely wrong. The Mac Mini and MacBook Pro didn't come, like you just said. So at the very least, even if the things we do see are still leaked, the fact that we don't know exactly what's going to happen is making things interesting again. And I agree. I'd love to see what's going on behind the scenes, because someone's got the right information and is spilling it out there, but also someone's got the wrong information and is spilling it out there. So is that one of Apple's disinformation campaigns? Like they're trying to muddy the waters?
I don't believe that. I hear those rumors all the time. Do you really believe that Apple needs to spend their time disseminating their own rumors?
They might. I mean, that was the rumor, right? That they like made their own task force that would like investigate these and make sure that doesn't happen. I mean, Apple and secrecy is one of the biggest things they care about.
I believe that Apple investigates leaks, but I'm talking about people who believe Apple is leaking misinformation themselves.
I mean, crazier things have happened. I know.
Yes.
People have long rumored or speculated that the New York Times and like the Wall Street Journal, those leaks, whenever they report things, come directly from Apple. I don't think that's ever been confirmed, but I think that's kind of the widely held belief, is that when a big publication like that posts something, that it's actually coming from Apple themselves in some way, shape, or form. And I don't see why they wouldn't, on the other hand, like leak something to a John Prosser, and everything would check out because this person does work at Apple. This person does know what's going on. They could, verify things and then just give them a little bit of wrong information. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past Apple. Maybe that's a little too like spy investigative movie for what Apple would actually do in the real world, but it's fun to think about. At least something's got to explain the completely wrong rumors at the very least.
Also, so going back, I guess to clarify the announcement, peak performance, PEAK, I guess, was referring to the display. We're peaking at the display. I had heard some rumors that we were peaking at VR goggles. We were peaking at the Mac Pro. That was never, I don't know where this information about the Mac Pro came out from, but I've heard multiple people say that, we're going to get an announcement or a preview of the Mac Pro. That was never on the table as a rumor, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
So, not sure where that came from, but I guess now, hindsight 2020, peak was referring to the display probably, and I guess peak performance with the M1 Ultra.
Yeah, I guess.
The colors is a mystery. I don't know why, if we're going back and looking at the tea leaves, I don't know what the colors referred to. Maybe the colors of the Ultra. I don't know.
No,
it doesn't make any sense. But I am curious to see, now moving forward, it's a little bit more it's more murky. I don't know what the M2 lineup looks like. Now, like I mentioned earlier, now the rumor is no mini LED or M1 or M2 rather in the MacBook Air, which would be weird. Maybe M2 gets delayed till 2023. Things are looking a little dicey, so it'll be curious to see what Apple does next. And hopefully the next event would be sometime around May or June. June for sure for WWDC. Wouldn't be surprised if there's another spring event that gives us some of the forgotten Macs that were not at this event, namely any with the M2, maybe an introduction of the M2, and then Mac Mini, iPad Pro, and maybe MacBook Air, if that makes sense.
Yep. No, I agree. There's lots of questions going forward. I'm most interested to see what happens with this M2, because I think that kind kind of defines the fate of a lot of these products. So it'll be really interesting to see. But yeah, lots of good stuff still, even though, there's some questions about everything and some maybe less than exciting reactions that we're having now. Still overall very good announcement, very happy with it. Lots of cool things. I'm glad Apple is still pushing the boundaries. I mean, the M1 Ultra seems awesome. So yeah, lots of good stuff. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, anything like that, be sure to reach out to the hotline. The number for that is 949-354-3508. You can text us, you can call us, or go into the YouTube channel and leave us a comment, or over on Twitter. Whatever way you want to ask a question, go for it, because we love asking or answering the questions that
I don't think so. That was exciting. It was so cool to see those last minute
though?
leaks and rumors. It was fun to discuss. And Matt, I will be patiently awaiting in 2 episodes from now your first thoughts on Mac Studio and also Studio Display. I'm sure next week we'll have more Apple news to talk about. We'll have more rumors, more leaks, and I'm sure more will leak out. Or actually, next week we'll actually get some initial impressions from the embargo videos that drop, because if you sort of follow Apple stuff, usually the couple days before the release on the 18th, we get some embargo drops of these products. So hopefully next week we'll hear from those who have them early on what they think. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, listening, subscribing to the Apple Circle podcast. We appreciate it. And we will see you guys right back here, same time, same place, next week.